She thought pressing delete on her phone meant the video was gone forever. She forgot she married a cybersecurity analyst. I was doing a routine server backup when I found the hidden folder. It was a clip from her bachelorette party, 3 days before our wedding. In it, she was laughing, drunk, telling her friends that I was just the safe option and the stable paycheck, while she bragged about getting one final upgrade with a corporate VP before walking down the aisle. I didn't scream. I didn't wake her up. I treated her infidelity like a hostile network intrusion. I spent 6 weeks quietly tracking her GPS, downloading her chat logs, and letting her spend our money on him so I could build a financial death trap. You think you know revenge? Watch how I destroyed her life without ever raising my voice. In my line of work, we operate on a single, governing principle. There is no such thing as a truly secure system. There are only systems that have been compromised and systems that are about to be. My name is Daniel Foster. For 6 years, I served as a signals intelligence officer in the United States Army, sitting in windowless, air-conditioned rooms, listening to the static of the world to find patterns in the noise. I learned how to track targets not by seeing them, but by analyzing the digital exhaust they left behind, the metadata, the frequency shifts, the silence where sound used to be. Today, I work as a senior cybersecurity analyst for a defense contractor in the Pacific Northwest. I build firewalls, I hunt threats. I am paid a significant salary to be paranoid, to assume that everything is a lie until the logs prove otherwise. And yet, for the last 8 months, I have been the biggest security vulnerability in my own home. On paper, my life was a masterpiece of the American dream. I was 32 years old, married to a woman who looked like the result of a focus group on perfect wives, living in a 4-bedroom colonial house in an upscale suburb just outside of Seattle. We had the dual incomes, the quartz countertops, the leased luxury SUVs in the driveway, and the carefully curated social media presence. From the outside, we were a fortress of stability, but inside, the operational temperature was freezing. Our house did not feel like a home. It felt like a hotel lobby, immaculate, expensive, and emotionally sterile. We had been married for less than a year, a period that civilians call the honeymoon phase, but the atmosphere in our living room was heavy with a silence that felt tactical. It was the kind of silence I used to hear on intercepted radio frequencies right before an ambush. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself that marriage was simply an adjustment of variables, a merger of 2 independent operating systems. But my brain, trained to detect anomalies, began to flag small, inconsistent data points. It started with the phone. In the beginning of our relationship, phones were left on coffee tables, screens facing up, notifications chiming openly. It was a policy of transparency. But 3 months ago, the protocol changed. Jessica's phone began to live in her pocket or face down on every surface. If a notification buzzed, her hand would move to cover it with a reflex speed that was almost athletic. It was not a casual gesture, it was a defensive maneuver. When I walked into a room, she would not just lock the screen, she would slide the device under a pillow or flip a magazine over it. Then came the bathroom protocols. She started taking long showers, 40 minutes, sometimes an hour. In the past, the door was left ajar, the intimacy of a shared space. Now, the door was locked. I would stand in our bedroom, listening to the sound of the water running, but underneath the hiss of the shower, there was no sound of movement, just a steady, artificial white noise. One evening, the water stopped, but the door remained locked for another 10 minutes. When she finally emerged, surrounded by a cloud of steam, her phone was in her hand, the screen wet. She claimed she was listening to podcasts, but I never heard any voices. The most painful anomaly, however, was the laughter. I work from home 2 days a week. My office is down the hall from hers. Through the drywall, I would hear her on conference calls. She works in corporate marketing, a world of high energy and social maneuvering. I would hear her talking to her team, and specifically to a male voice on the other end. Her tone was vibrant, engaging, filled with a melodic laughter that I had not heard directed at me in months. She sounded alive. She sounded like the woman I dated. But the moment she hung up and walked into the kitchen, where I was making coffee, the signal died. Her face would reset to a neutral, polite mask. The customer service interface was gone, replaced by a cold, low-bandwidth tolerance. "How was your day?" I would ask. "Fine, busy," she would reply, without making eye contact, her thumbs already typing a message on her screen. That shift in tone from vibrant to flat is what we call a signature change in intelligence work. It indicates that the target is behaving differently depending on the observer. I should have confronted her. I should have deployed my skills to investigate, but I did not. I engaged in willful denial. I suppressed my professional instincts because I wanted the narrative to be true. When we met, Jessica had sworn to me that her past was clean. She told me she was tired of the bad boys and the drama of her 20s. She told me she wanted safety, loyalty, and a man who was stable. I was the safe harbor. I was the reliable paycheck and the steady hand. I wanted to believe that I was enough. I wanted to believe the user interface she presented to me, so I refused to look at the source code. I convinced myself that this was just the cooling period of a modern marriage. I told myself that my suspicions were just the side effects of a career spent hunting phantoms. I told myself I was paranoid. But intuition is just data processing that happens too fast for your conscious mind to articulate. One Tuesday night, the atmosphere in the house shifted from cold to suffocating. We were eating dinner in silence. The only sound was the scrape of silverware on porcelain. She was texting under the table. I saw the blue reflection of the screen, illuminating her chin. She smiled a small, private smile that she immediately suppressed when she looked up and saw me watching her. "Work stuff," she said, her voice tight. She stood up, took her half-eaten plate to the sink, and washed it immediately, turning her back to me. "I am going to bed early. Do not wake me up when you come in." I sat alone at the dining table, looking at her empty chair. The silence in the house was no longer empty. It was screaming. My gut tightened. It was the same physical sensation I used to get in the army, when a convoy route looked clear, but the birds had stopped singing. The system was compromised. I did not have the hard drive logs yet. I did not have the intercepted packets. I did not have the smoking gun. But I knew, with the cold certainty of an operator staring at a blinking red light, that the security of my marriage had been breached. I stood up and walked to my home office. I sat down in my ergonomic chair and looked at the bank of monitors glowing in the dark. My denial was gone. The husband was asleep. The analyst was awake. It was time to run a scan. It was 1 hour and 14 minutes past midnight on a Tuesday. The silence in the suburbs is different from the silence in the field. It is heavier, insulated by drywall and double-pane glass. Jessica was asleep in the master bedroom, her breathing rhythmic and undisturbed. I was awake in my office, illuminated only by the cool blue wash of 3 liquid crystal display monitors. I was not hunting for secrets. I was performing digital janitorial work. Every quarter, I run a routine maintenance cycle on our home network. I consolidate our data photos, tax documents, insurance records onto a central network-attached storage server. In the cybersecurity world, we live by the rule of redundancy. If data does not exist in 3 places, it does not exist at all. I was simply migrating the contents of her old smartphone, which she had tossed into a junk drawer months ago, onto the secure drive. It was a mindless task, the digital equivalent of folding laundry. The transfer bar crawled across the screen. Green text scrolled down the terminal window as my script verified the file integrity. I sipped my lukewarm coffee, my mind drifting to a compliance report I needed to file for work the next day. Then, the script paused. An error message flashed on the secondary monitor. Unmatched directory detected. I leaned in. The system had flagged a folder that did not match the standard naming conventions of the operating system. It was buried deep within the application data of a calculator app, a common hiding spot for users who think they are clever. The folder was labeled simply, System, Temp, 88. To a layman, it looked like a cache file. To me, it looked like a anomaly. I did not suspect infidelity at that specific moment. I suspected malware. I thought perhaps her phone had been compromised by a phishing link. Purely out of habit, acting on the muscle memory of a decade in intelligence, I ran a decryption tool. The password protection was laughably weak. It was her birthday followed by the year she graduated college. The folder unlocked. It did not contain system files. It contained 12 gigabytes of high-definition video files. I opened the first file. The timestamp metadata read, June 14, 3 days before our wedding. The screen filled with the chaotic, shaky visuals of a hotel suite in Las Vegas. The lighting was dim, punctuated by the strobe of a neon sign outside the window. Empty champagne bottles littered the granite countertops. The camera panned unsteadily, capturing a room full of women, her bridesmaids laughing with the unrestrained, glossy hysteria of a bachelorette party. And then, the camera landed on Jessica. She was wearing a white sash that read bride-to-be in glittery gold letters. She was holding a martini glass, her face flushed with alcohol, her eyes bright and unfocused. She looked beautiful, wild, and completely unrecognizable from the woman who folded napkins at our dinner table. The woman holding the camera laughed. "Come on, Jess. Tell the truth. Are you ready to be a boring housewife?" On the screen, Jessica took a long drink. She smirked, a cruel, sharp expression I had never seen directed at me. "Please," she said, her voice cutting through the background bass of the music. "I am getting the ring, not a lobotomy. Daniel is the safe option. You do not marry the guy who rips your clothes off. You marry the guy who pays the mortgage and never asks questions." My heart did not speed up. It stopped. It felt as though the blood in my veins had instantly turned into liquid nitrogen. On the screen, the friends shrieked with laughter. "You are terrible," one of them yelled. "Does he know about the weekend?" Jessica winked at the camera lens. "Daniel thinks I am at a spa retreat in Arizona. He is sweet. He trusts everything I say. That is why he is the perfect husband. He is stable." But before I walked down that aisle, she leaned in close to the microphone, whispering loudly. I needed one final upgrade. I needed to test marriage early with someone who actually knows what he is doing. "Who is it this time?" the camera operator asked. Jessica threw her head back. "Gavin, from the Chicago office. The VP." The video ended. The media player window closed, returning me to the silent, dark desktop. I sat in my chair, perfectly motionless. In a normal human reaction, this is the moment where the subject begins to cry. They throw the keyboard, they scream, they run into the bedroom and demand answers. I did none of those things. My training took over. In the military, when you take effective fire, you do not panic. Panic gets you killed. You assess the damage, you locate the source of fire, and you formulate a counteroffensive. I felt a physical click in the base of my skull. It was a psychological circuit breaker tripping. The part of me that was a husband, the part that felt love, hope, and vulnerability was instantly quarantined and shut down. In its place, the operator came online. The pain was there, but it was distant, like a radio transmission coming from miles away. What I felt most prominently was clarity. Cold, absolute clarity. She had not just cheated, she had mocked me. She had looked into a camera lens 3 days before, pledging her life to me, and declared that I was nothing more than a financial utility. I was a safe option. I was infrastructure. I was a resource to be exploited. While this Gavin was the passion she actually desired. I reached for the mouse. My hand was steady. I did not delete the file. I created a new directory on the secure, hidden partition of my server. I labeled it Case 0. I copied the video file. Then I copied the entire folder. I initiated a checksum verification to ensure every byte was preserved perfectly. I was no longer archiving family memories. I was securing evidence for a future operation. Once the backup was complete, I turned off the monitors. The room plunged into darkness. I stood up and walked down the hallway to our bedroom. The floorboards did not creak. I knew exactly where to step. I pushed the door open silently. Jessica was still sleeping. She was curled on her side, her hand resting on the pillow where my head usually lay. She looked innocent. She looked peaceful. I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Yesterday, I would have looked at her and seen my future. Today, I looked at her and saw a hostile entity. She was an enemy combatant, sleeping inside my perimeter. I did not feel anger anymore. I felt the cold calculation of a man looking at a problem that needed to be neutralized. I walked to the bed, pulled back the duvet, and laid down next to her. I stared up at the dark ceiling, listening to her breathe, plotting the first steps of the dismantling. The marriage was over. The operation had just begun. I lay in the dark next to Jessica for exactly 12 minutes. I listened to the soft rhythm of her breathing, a sound that used to bring me peace, but now sounded like the ticking of a countdown timer. My mind was not racing. It was buffering, loading a new operating system. I realized that sleeping next to her was a tactical error. I could not rest in a compromised zone. I slid out of bed, silent as a shadow, and returned to my office. The room was cold, the air conditioning humming with a low, industrial drone. I sat down, cracked my knuckles, and woke the monitors. In the military, when you identify a hostile signal, you do not fire blindly into the dark. You map the network. You identify the nodes. You track the traffic. This was no longer a marriage. It was an advanced, persistent threat investigation. I started with the cloud. Jessica, like most civilians, believed that delete meant gone. She did not understand that data is rarely destroyed. It is simply overwritten or flagged as invisible. I accessed her cloud backup archives, pulling the logs from the last 18 months. I mounted the drive images as virtual disks and began to run a forensic recovery script. The screen filled with lines of code, scrolling faster than the human eye could read, extracting fragments of deleted conversations, cached images, and location history. I poured myself a black coffee and watched my life disintegrate in real time. The first thing I reconstructed was the timeline. I pulled her geolocation data, the digital breadcrumbs left by cell towers and GPS satellites. I overlaid this map with her calendar. The discrepancies appeared immediately, glowing like red flares on a topographic map. There were 7 distinct weekends labeled girls' trip or marketing conference in the last year. 3 occurred while we were engaged. 4 happened after the wedding. I cross-referenced these dates and coordinates with open-source intelligence on Gavin. It took me less than 20 minutes to build his profile. Gavin Reynolds, Senior Vice President of Sales, married, 2 daughters, a sprawling estate in the suburbs of Chicago. I pulled his public travel schedule from his assistant's carelessly public LinkedIn posts and cross-referenced it with Jessica's location history. The pattern was perfect. When Jessica was in San Diego for a girls' spa weekend, Gavin was there for a client summit. Their GPS coordinates overlapped at the same luxury resort, the same steakhouse, the same late-night lounge. This was not a slip-up. It was a parallel operation. She had been running a second life during the entire time she was planning our wedding. While we were tasting cakes, she was coordinating hotel rendezvous with him. While I was writing my vows, she was sexting him from the bridal suite fitting room. I moved from the timeline to the finances. This was the forensic accounting phase. I logged into our joint bank accounts and credit card statements. I filtered the transactions by date and location. The spreadsheet revealed the brutal economic truth of her betrayal. I saw charges for dinners, Ubers, and hotel incidentals in cities where she claimed to be staying with friends. She had used our joint checking account, the money I deposited from my paycheck every 2 weeks, to subsidize her affair. I saw a charge for a $400 dinner in Miami on a night. I sat home alone eating leftovers because she said she was too busy networking to talk. She was not just cheating on me, she was billing me for the service. But the data that truly cauterized my emotions, the data that turned my heart into a block of ice, was the chat logs. My recovery script had finished reconstructing a thread of deleted iMessages between her and Gavin. I opened the file. It was thousands of lines long. I forced myself to read them, not as a husband, but as an analyst processing raw intelligence. The intimacy was nauseating, but the disrespect was lethal. In a message dated 2 weeks ago, Gavin asked, "Is he suspicious? You have been gone a lot lately." Jessica's reply, "Daniel? No, he operates on a loop. Work, gym, server maintenance, sleep. He is like a piece of software. As long as I give him the right inputs, he doesn't crash." Gavin, "You are bad." "I love it. When are you leaving the ATM?" Jessica, "I can't yet. The ATM just bought a new house. I need the security, Gavin. You are the adrenaline. He is the utility. Let me enjoy the upgrade for a while longer." I stared at the words glowing on the screen. The utility, the ATM, software. They did not just betray me. They dehumanized me. To them, I was not a man. I was infrastructure. I was the IT support ticket that kept their lives running smoothly so they could enjoy the chaos without consequences. I sat back in my chair. The room was completely silent, but inside my head the noise was deafening. The last remnant of affection I held for Jessica evaporated. The grief was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I looked at the clock. It was 4:14 a.m. I had the who, the what, the where, and the when. I had enough evidence to win a divorce case in any court in America. I could wake her up right now, throw the tablet on the bed, and scream until the neighbors called the police. I could blow up her life before the sun came up. But that was a civilian reaction. That was emotional, messy, and inefficient. If I confronted her now, she would spin it. She would cry. She would blame the alcohol, the stress, the distance. She would try to negotiate, and Gavin, he would retreat to Chicago, hide behind his lawyers, and likely keep his high-paying job, dismissing this as a lapse in judgment. No. In my world, you do not just repel an attack, you eliminate the threat architecture. You do not just catch the spy, you burn the network so that it can never operate again. I needed more than just a divorce. I needed a dismantling. I needed to synchronize the destruction of her personal life with the collapse of her professional standing and the exposure of her lover's misconduct. I needed to ensure that when I walked away, I left them with nothing but each other and the ruin they created. I saved the dossier to an encrypted external hard drive. I pulled the drive from the port and locked it in my fireproof safe. I stood up and walked to the window. The first gray light of dawn was creeping over the suburban skyline, illuminating the manicured lawns and the silent houses. The world looked exactly the same as it had yesterday, but everything had changed. I was no longer the husband. I was the architect of their downfall, and I had a plan to build. The hardest part of any undercover operation is not the infiltration. It is the maintenance of the cover. For the next 3 weeks, I did not sleep in the guest room. I did not sulk. I did not hint at what I knew. I continued to share a bed with the woman who was actively dismantling my life, and I played the role she had written for me to perfection. I became the boring Daniel, she mocked in her texts. I asked mundane questions about the weather. I nodded while she complained about her workload. I kissed her on the cheek before leaving for the office. Every interaction was a calculated performance of psychological camouflage. In the intelligence community, we call this establishing a baseline. If the target feels comfortable, the target gets sloppy. And Jessica was getting very comfortable. She texted Gavin while sitting right next to me on the sofa, convinced that I was too dense, too safe, to ever suspect a thing. She didn't realize that every smile I gave her was a lie designed to keep her within the kill zone. While she lived in the illusion of safety, I was building the cage. My first move was defensive. I took a half-day off work, claiming a dentist appointment, and drove to a high-rise in downtown Seattle to meet with a divorce attorney named Marcus. He was a shark in a tailored suit, the kind of man who viewed marriage not as a sacrament, but as a contract subject to breach. I sat in his glass-walled conference room and laid out the spreadsheet. I didn't cry about heartbreak. I pointed to the columns. She is using marital assets to fund an extramarital affair, I said, my voice flat. I have the receipts, the dates, and the cross-reference bank statements. This is dissipation of assets. Marcus looked at the file, then at me. He smiled, a cold, predatory flexing of muscles. In this state, infidelity doesn't always matter for the divorce itself, but financial misconduct? That matters. If she wasted community funds on the affair, we can deduct that from her share of the equity. We can freeze the accounts. We can protect the house. We spent 2 hours structuring the separation agreement. It was a surgical strike on our shared finances. We drafted the petition to ensure I kept my retirement, my investments, and the home I had paid the down payment for. By the time I walked out of his office, I had a packet of documents that acted as a financial death warrant for our marriage. I opened a new secure bank account at a different institution and began diverting my direct deposits, leaving just enough in the joint account to keep the lights on until D-Day. With my assets secured, I turned my attention to the offensive. I turned my attention to Gavin Reynolds. I did not need to hack Gavin. I did not need to break into his email or plant a bug in his office. People like Gavin, arrogant, successful corporate climbers, are their own worst enemies. They leave digital footprints everywhere because they believe they are untouchable. I used open source intelligence (OSINT) techniques to map his digital life. I accessed public records, his company's compliance documents, and his own social media. Gavin was careless. He treated his corporate expense account like a personal piggy bank. I correlated his business trips with the weekends he spent with Jessica. I found a photo he posted on Instagram, a $400 bottle of wine at a steakhouse in San Diego, captioned, "Closing Deals." The timestamp matched a charge on Jessica's credit card for a spa treatment at the same hotel. I dug deeper. I found the conference agenda for that weekend. The sessions ended at 4 p.m., but his client dinners were expensed at midnight. I wasn't just looking for proof of an affair. I was looking for proof of fraud, and I found it. He was expensing personal travel. He was using company funds to entertain a mistress who was technically a vendor partner, a massive violation of his company's conflict of interest policy. Furthermore, I found digital traces on Glassdoor and professional forums hinting at a pattern of him targeting female subordinates. I compiled everything into a single, devastating PDF file. I didn't write it like a jealous husband. I wrote it like a forensic auditor. I labeled it Compliance Concern, Misappropriation of Corporate Funds and Ethics Violations. Re. Gavin Reynolds. The dossier contained the dates, the receipts, the policy violations, and the undeniable proof that he was exposing his company to liability. I attached the photos. I attached the logs. It was verifiable, objective, and lethal. I prepared the email. The recipients were carefully selected: the chairman of the board, the chief people officer, HR, and the chief legal officer of his company. I used a secure, anonymous remailer service to ensure it could not be traced back to me. The trap was built. Now, I just needed to set the timer. I looked at the calendar. Our 1-year wedding anniversary was 5 days away. The paper anniversary. It was poetic. Jessica had been dropping hints for weeks about a romantic dinner, a reset button for us. She wanted to post a photo of us clinking glasses to prove to her followers that she had it all: the exciting lover on the side and the stable husband at home. I decided to give her exactly what she wanted, a night she would never forget. On the morning of the anniversary, I scheduled the email to Gavin's HR department to deploy at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I had the divorce papers signed, notarized, and sealed in a thick manila envelope. I packed a go bag with my essentials and left it in the trunk of my car. I walked into the kitchen. Jessica was making a smoothie, humming to herself. She looked happy. She had no idea that the ground beneath her feet had already been mined and the fuse was burning. I poured myself a coffee, leaning against the counter, watching her with a calmness that scared even me. "Happy anniversary, Daniel," she said, leaning in to kiss me. I didn't flinch. I accepted the kiss. It felt like nothing. "Happy anniversary," I replied. "I was thinking we should stay in tonight. I'll cook. Maybe open that expensive bottle of wine we've been saving." Her eyes lit up. "That sounds perfect. I love it when you cook." "Great," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "I have a surprise plan, something big." She smiled, thinking of jewelry or a vacation. "I can't wait." "Neither can I said. I checked my watch. The email was queued. The lawyer was on standby. The evidence was loaded on the tablet. The execution phase was locked in. "What do you want for dinner?" I asked, my voice steady, my pulse slowing down to a resting rate. She looked at me, beaming. "Surprise me." "Oh," I thought, walking out of the kitchen. "I definitely will." The kill zone was prepared. The table was set with bone china and crystal wine glasses that caught the flicker of the beeswax candles. To the untrained eye, this was a romantic celebration of our first year of marriage, the paper anniversary. To me, it was the final stage of a demolition operation. It was 7:15 p.m. The atmosphere in the dining room was warm, smelling of rosemary and expensive Cabernet. Jessica was sitting across from me, looking radiant in a black dress I had bought her for her birthday. She held her phone up, angling it to capture the perfect shot of our dinner setup for Instagram. She tagged me. She added the caption, "1 year down, forever to go. So lucky to be doing life with my best friend." I watched the notification slide across my own phone screen. It was a digital lie, broadcast to the world. I did not like the post. I simply turned my phone over. "This is beautiful, Daniel," she said, lowering her device and reaching for her wine. Her eyes were soft, filled with an affection that might have been real, or might have been habit. "I know I have been distracted lately with work. I promise, this year is going to be different. I want to focus on us." I sliced my steak with surgical precision. "I agree," I said. My voice was calm, modulated to a flat, non-threatening frequency. "Everything is going to be different starting tonight." I took a sip of wine. I checked my watch. 7:20 p.m. The automated email I had queued for her lover's Human Resources Department, had been sent 20 minutes ago. The blast wave was traveling through the digital infrastructure of corporate America, and it was about to make landfall at my dining table. "I have a surprise for you," I said. Jessica smiled, her eyes lighting up with the anticipation of a gift. "You got me something." "In a way," I said. "I wanted to remind us of how this started, before the stress, before the work trips." I picked up my tablet from the sideboard. With a single tap, I mirrored the screen to the 65-inch television mounted on the wall behind her. The screen flickered from black to the frozen thumbnail of a video file. "What is this?" she asked, turning in her chair to look at the screen. "Just a memory," I said. I pressed play. The silence of the room was shattered by the distorted, bass-heavy audio of the Bachelorette party. The visuals were crisp 4K resolution, projected larger than life. Jessica's face, flushed with alcohol and arrogance, filled the room. "Daniel is the safe option," the digital Jessica screamed, her voice echoing off the hardwood floors. "You do not marry the guy who rips your clothes off. You marry the guy who pays the mortgage." In the dining room, the real Jessica froze. She stopped breathing. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like a physical injury. She stared at the screen, her mouth slightly open, watching herself lean into the camera. "I needed one final upgrade. I needed to test marriage early. Daniel will never know." I let the video play until the end, until the laughter of her friends faded into digital silence. Then, I paused it on the frame of her winking at the camera. The room was dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Jessica turned back to me. Her hands were trembling. She tried to speak, but her voice was a dry croak. "Daniel, that was just a joke. It was a party. We were drunk. It does not mean anything." I did not scream. I did not throw my wine glass. I reached under the table and pulled out the thick, manila envelope I had taped there an hour ago. I slid it across the mahogany table. It stopped perfectly in front of her plate. "It is not a joke, Jessica," I said. The temperature in my voice had dropped to absolute zero. "And I know who Gavin Reynolds is." The mention of his name hit her like a kinetic strike. She flinched physically, shrinking back into her chair. "I know about the weekends in San Diego," I continued, reciting the data like I was reading a mission report. "I know about the dinners charged to our joint account. I know you call me the utility in your private chats. I have known for 6 weeks. I have read every message. I have tracked every dollar." "No," she whispered, tears finally spilling over, hot and panicked. "Daniel, please, let me explain. It is over. It was a mistake." "It was not a mistake," I corrected her. "It was a campaign. And now it is a liability I am liquidating." I pointed to the envelope. "Those are divorce papers. My lawyer drafted them. The house, my savings, my retirement, they are protected. You are leaving with exactly what you brought into this marriage. Nothing." She opened her mouth to argue, to launch the counteroffensive of tears and manipulation. But suddenly, the second stage of the trap detonated. Her phone, lying face up on the table, began to vibrate violently. Then it lit up. Then it rang. It was Gavin. Then it rang again. A text message notification popped up. Then another, then another. The phone was having a seizure. Jessica looked at the screen. I saw the terror in her eyes as she read the preview of the messages. "HR just contacted me. They have logs. They have the receipts. My account is locked." "What did you do?" "I did not just divorce you, Jessica," I said, standing up. I buttoned my suit jacket. "I filed a formal whistleblower complaint with Gavin's company regarding the misappropriation of corporate funds for your little affairs. I sent them the travel logs. I sent them the timestamps. By tomorrow morning, he will be fired. His wife likely knows by now as well." She looked up at me, and for the first time, she saw the man she had actually married. Not the safe paycheck, not the blind fool. She saw the intelligence officer. She saw the man who treats threats with total elimination. "You destroyed everything," she sobbed, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "You ruined my life. You ruined his life." "No," I said, picking up my leather weekend bag from the hallway floor, where I had staged it. "I just aggregated the data. You destroyed yourselves. I am just the auditor." She stood up, reaching for me, her hands shaking, her face a mask of ruined mascara and desperation. "Daniel, please. Where are you going? We have to talk about this. I walked to the front door. I did not look back. I did not hesitate. The house behind me was warm, filled with food and music, but it was already a ghost town. I am done talking, I said, and you have a lot of packing to do. I opened the door and stepped out into the cool, sharp air of the evening. I heard her scream my name as the latch clicked shut, severing the connection. I walked down the driveway to my car, the gravel crunching under my boots. I felt light. I felt clean. The operation was a success. The target was neutralized. I started the engine and drove away, leaving the wreckage in the rearview mirror, never once tapping the brakes. It has been 6 months since I walked out of that house. 6 months since the paper anniversary that ended in a digital demolition. I am currently standing on the balcony of my new apartment on the 24th floor of a high-rise in downtown Seattle. The rain is lashing against the glass, blurring the city lights into streaks of gray and neon. The air up here is thin, cold, and smells of ozone and wet concrete. It is a stark contrast to the manicured, suffocating perfume of the suburbs. My apartment is sparse modern furniture, exposed steel, a dedicated server rack in the corner, and absolutely no clutter. It is not cozy, it is efficient, it is secure. In the military, after every mission, we conduct an after-action review, AAR. We analyze what went right, what went wrong, and the status of the objective. Objective status: complete. The divorce was not the war Jessica expected. It was a capitulation. She expected a long, emotional battle where she could cry to a judge about how I was cold or distant. She underestimated the leverage of forensic accounting. My lawyer Marcus sat across from her and her attorney in a sterile conference room 3 weeks after I left. He didn't raise his voice. He simply slid a 3-inch binder across the table. It contained the financial audit of her affair, the misappropriated joint funds, the hotel receipts, the falsified travel expenses. In this state, Marcus told her calmly, dissipation of marital assets allows us to claw back every cent you spent on Mr. Reynolds from your share of the home equity. If we go to trial, this binder becomes public record. Daniel is offering a settlement. He keeps the house to sell, he keeps his retirement, and you walk away with your car and your personal effects. No spousal support. She signed the papers in less than 4 minutes. She had no choice. She was bankrupt of credibility and capital. The fallout for the co-conspirators was equally total. The package I sent to Gavin's corporate headquarters functioned exactly as designed. Corporations do not care about morality, they care about liability. Gavin was not fired for sleeping with my wife. He was fired for gross misconduct regarding company resources and violation of compliance policies. I saw the update on LinkedIn, a subtle change in his status, followed by the erasure of his profile photo. In the corporate world, that is a digital execution. He is now radioactive. No reputable firm will hire a VP who treats the company credit card like a personal slush fund. As for Jessica, the career woman persona she cultivated crumbled. The scandal at her company, triggered by the investigation into Gavin, made her position untenable. She was asked to resign to avoid further investigation. It is the corporate way of taking out the trash quietly. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she tried to spin the narrative in the early days. She tried to tell our circle of friends that I was abusive, paranoid, and controlling. She tried to paint herself as the victim of a loveless marriage. But the data has a way of surfacing. I never published the Bachelorette video. I didn't have to. The rumor of it, the existence of the receipts, was enough. The friends who were in that hotel room, the ones cheering her on, laughing about me being the safe option, quietly distanced themselves. They realized that if I had the footage of Jessica, I likely had footage of them too. Self-preservation kicked in. The girl squad disintegrated. Jessica is now living in a rental unit 40 minutes south of the city, likely working a mid-level job, stripped of the status and stability she mocked me for providing. My life, by comparison, has undergone a hard reset. I wake up at 5 every morning. I run 5 miles along the waterfront before the city wakes up. I lift heavy. I eat clean. The softness of the suburban husband has been burned off. I have lost 15 pounds of stress weight and gained a hardness that reflects my internal state. My career has accelerated. Without the distraction of a failing marriage and the energy drain of suspecting a liar, I have doubled my output. I was promoted to lead security architect last month. I manage systems that protect billions of dollars in assets. I am good at it because I no longer believe in the concept of safe. I believe in secure. There is a difference. Safe is a feeling, secure is a protocol. Sometimes in the quiet of the evening, I look at the empty side of my king-size bed. I do not feel loneliness. I feel the relief of a man who realized his parachute was sabotaged just before he jumped out of the plane. I loved her. I admit that. The ghost of that love still haunts the hallways of my memory occasionally. But I treat those memories like quarantine files, infected data that I can observe but must never execute. I learned the most expensive lesson of my life. Trust is not a virtue, it is a vulnerability. It is a port you leave open to the internet. If you do not monitor the traffic, if you do not verify the user, you will be breached. I did not lose a wife. I removed a critical security flaw from my operating system. I patched the code. I finished my scotch and set the glass down on the granite counter. The city lights below are beautiful, cold, and indifferent. I am alone, but I am solvent. I am free. And for the first time in years, I am operating at 100% efficiency. She wanted a narrative of passion and danger. She wanted to live in a movie. I simply directed the ending. I turn off the lights, plunging the apartment into a darkness that feels like peace. She wanted a life of thrills and secrets. I gave her exactly what she asked for. I just made sure I wasn't the one paying the bill. Ultimately, Daniel's story isn't just about a cold, calculated revenge. It is about the quiet dignity of reclaiming your own worth. It reminds us that the most dangerous lie isn't the one someone tells us, but the one we tell ourselves when we ignore our intuition to keep the peace. Walking away wasn't an act of hate, it was an act of profound self-love. It takes immense courage to accept that the person you love is a sunk cost. But remember, you are the architect of your own life, and you never have to settle for being someone else's safe option. You deserve to be the priority. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and join the Secret Lovers family. We want to hear your voice. Have you ever had to trust your gut feeling to save yourself from a bad situation? Let us know your story in the comments below, and please tell us which state, city, or province you are watching from today. We love seeing where our community is around the world. Don't forget to click the video on the screen for another story of betrayal and justice. See you there.